whack about it is that like there's this inherent challenge, right? Like, is this a real word? Are you just saying something?
Oh,
that's
do
true.
you remember?
People be doing that to you though.
Do you remember this black quote? What movie is it from? Like, I don't. People don't do it to me. That's Ken right now.
That's cute. So what up, though? It's Dwan Dandridge, Black Leaders Detroit, and we are back with another episode of Speak for Yourself. Have none other than Ken Elkins to my right.
What's happening?
And our guest this week is Alia Harvey-Quinn.
What up, though? Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So the way we typically start off the show is we don't put the pressure on ourselves to read off your resume because we're sure that we'll miss something. We like to invite our guests to introduce themselves to our audience the way that they would like our audience to know them. So how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm a black woman, a mama, an artist. I'm a community organizer, founder and executive director of Force Detroit, nonprofit leader. That's me. I try to do good work and honor the legacy of good organizers over the generations.
That's what's up. That's what's up. So for anybody that doesn't know, what is Force Detroit? What are you doing at Force Detroit?
Yeah, so Force Detroit is a nonprofit. We were founded in 2015. We are working for a freer and safer Detroit. We do that through participatory research, narrative building, community violence intervention, and coalition building. Towards that, we are working to build up the community violence intervention ecosystem in Detroit. We do lots of advocacy and organizing, some redistributive funding, and we do programming in the Cody Rouge neighborhood.
Nice, nice. So I think one of the things that I'm interested in is I'm sure I know lots of black Detroiters, and not just Detroiters, but black folk, period, that kick off amazing organizations and do very impactful work. Mm-hmm. What is it that kind of inspired you to do this specifically?
Yeah, so I think most natural, I'm a poet, I'm an artist, and I was doing that work in the North End for years, and what I saw was like the young people that I was working with, they needed more than I had to offer. And there were some moments where things broke open, where I was like, I'm actually failing my people if I don't do more. And there was this one moment where I was teaching poetry to a group of young black men, and we had built enough a relationship for me to push them beyond like tropes and stereotypes. So I was asking them, we're all human, everybody's afraid of something. Write a poem about what you're afraid of. And this one young man said, I'm afraid of who I become when I have to rob people to help my mom pay the rent. And so I think it was moments like that was like, if I do this work, I have to do it differently. It has to be a little bit more gritty. It can't just be these really dope art projects that I was falling in love with. Had to be something that I felt like was, soul food for my people.
Yeah, he said he's afraid of who has to become. He's afraid of who he becomes when he has to rob people to help his mom pay bills. Not afraid of like what will happen to him or going to jail, afraid of who he becomes.
And it's crazy. This young man, he was in the 8th grade. He was like visibly poor, and but he was like, goofy, and he was all the things of a child. And that moment of intimacy, we all started like the whole room teared up. the workshop, of course, ended. And, like folks started crying and talking about the trap and talking about like, the role that prison plays in our community, the roles that at the time selling drugs was playing in our community, and how cyclical it was, and that they didn't really see a way out of it.
Yeah.
Because even living in certain neighborhoods required affiliation with certain groups for safety within community, right? And so they just were saying that they didn't see a way out of it. And that's scary, like, to not have an off-ramp in a life or death situation.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, like when you said, you mentioned that, he was goofy. Essentially, he was a kid.
Yeah.
Right? He was a kid. He probably really wanted to be a kid, just be a kid. But he couldn't be a kid. He had to become something else for survival, for him and his family, right? And so when you think of it that way and just, really thinking through those stories and how some people do have to become something else for that survival and just can't have the privilege of just being a kid, right?
Like
and
carefree in that way, absolutely.
Yeah. It just makes me reflect on, times where when I was young and would act out of anger and rage that I hadn't for things that was happening in my life that I hadn't had opportunity to process things. The way I describe it now is that we would have something really, really crazy happen, and the agreement was the agreement that we didn't even articulate, we didn't even speak, was that tomorrow we're gonna act like this didn't happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the other thing that kind of stands out in that is that it seems like the one opportunity that seems to be available in abundance is the opportunity to do some type of criminal activity, right?
Yeah.
It's not hard to find that group that you have to have an affiliation with. When I was growing up in the 80s, it was not hard to find a business owner in the community that would give you a sack to hustle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we'll put everybody on. We give everybody an opportunity.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how could we have people in that space, right, in that industry, be so willing to train, employ, promote, you know what I mean? Like, any and everybody.
I mean, I don't think, like, when we think about the statistics around, like, economics, I don't think we overlap them often with the Department of Labor statistics about what it costs to live in a particular region. Like, when we talk about our area median income, which is, I think, like 32,000, 33, around that for Detroit right now, Black Detroiters. The average household was living off of roughly 57K. And so, like, when you break that down into categories, there were 3 categories where, it was food, shelter, transportation. And we know in Detroit, transportation for most people isn't optional, right? And so, like, at some point, $32,000 was almost enough to cover those 3, but not quite enough. And so, like, it didn't include any entertainment. It didn't include any clothes. It didn't include literally nothing else. Like, that meant that as soon as you had an emergency, you were choosing between a basic need and meeting your emergency need. And that leads to high-risk behavior. And one of those high-risk behaviors is violence.
Can you share, as we talk through this and you talk about Force Detroit, can you share with us some of the successes? Or what do you think about when people ask you about the success of Force Detroit?
Yeah, so there are a lot of successes. We were invited to the 2022 Community Violence Intervention White House Initiative. So there were 16 cities chosen, roughly 52 organizations across those cities chosen. We were one of them.
Nice. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. And, we've been advocating for community violence intervention. We won the Michigan Office of Community Violence Intervention at the state level. That's super exciting.
Congratulations on that as well.
Thank you. We got named in the 2022 budget for funding our CVI work.
Well deserved.
Thank you. And now Shot Stoppers was another long-term advocacy fight that we won. And so now we're in partnership with the city for rolling out the safety strategies.
Yeah. So first, can you talk to anybody that doesn't know what Shot Stoppers is?
Yeah. So it's interesting. In name, it is connected to Shot Spotter.
Right, because it does sound like that.
Yeah, it's tricky in that way. I hate that. I hate the name.
That's what I thought when I heard it.
Yeah, so Shot Spotter is this, military grade technology that allows police to detect where a shot has been fired, but it is super reactive. Like, it can't do anything proactive. And CVI is designed inherently to be proactive and to stop violence before it occurs through leveraging relationships and preventing conflict before it escalates all the way to violence. And so, many community members came out and said, let's not invest in this technology. Let's invest in our community members, and it got coined from that twist of language.
All right, I like it. So you introduced a new, so you said CVI,
community violence intervention.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good. So I think I guess a thought that comes to mind for me is you said you fought hard. Y'all fought hard because I know it was a team, right?
Yeah.
Does it feel like at times you're fighting against the thing, right? Like the violence, and then you're fighting to get support and help people understand the need for the work that you do?
Yeah, so I don't think, because we do violence intervention, fight is actually the right term.
Good point. Touche.
So I think we are working hard to build narratives around it so people know what it is.
Yeah.
Most people who do community violence intervention are not going to chase ambulances, but they are going to work in networks that, every network in Detroit is pretty small, right? People tend to know each other.
Everybody knows everybody.
Same thing with violence, right? And then when you hear about conflicts escalating or contracts being put out on people's lives, when they hear it, because gotta honor the fact that I'm not one of the people that actually does the violence intervention work, and there are some really, really dope, mostly black men that do a lot of work in that space. They should be honored. Their names should be listed. So Ray Winans is one of them.
Yeah, shout out
Dwan, Dwan Kennedy.
Yeah, shout out to Dwan.
The Shot Stoppers groups that just got named. Hopefully they emerge as embracing the models of community violence intervention that have worked across the country.
Yeah.
But to speak more about what that is, it is essentially leveraging relationship to stop violence in much the same way you would take your friend's car keys when they're too drunk at a bar.
Gotcha.
Right. So it's hey, you don't want this. You don't really want the outcomes of this. Yeah. Somebody's going to end up dead. Somebody's going to end up in prison. You're going to ruin your life over what? Yeah. And so the strategies are those are the strategies for immediately disarming conflict in the moment. And then long term, people need jobs. People need mental health, etc. They need stuff so that they can reduce their triggers. So that's what the strategy looks like.
So when you're looking at that, you said in the immediate, how does that look in practice? Is that staff members? Is that different liaisons who are out in the street in different communities working with different groups of people? How does that look in practice?
Yeah, so it looks like having a team of violence intervention practitioners, and I can only speak to what we're doing. And they have one-on-ones, so they may be touching base with people over lunch or in person. They might do a workshop, but it is like intentional connection to build the relationship. Like, you know, we know who is at the center of violence. We know that they're at the center of violence mostly because they're traumatized. Building a relationship allows us to meet their needs, but also to welcome them into like more logical thoughts when they might be sabotaging their whole life with violence. And so, you know, it looks like a certain number of calls per day, a certain amount of, you know, face-to-face contact per week. It looks like emergency response in a moment of conflict to de-escalate. It looks like follow-up from a case manager to make sure that, like, you got all your identifying information, you get your jobs, you got the mental health care you need, somebody paid your DTE bill, somebody, like, so that the things that are sort of surface level don't become the triggers for conflict.
Nice. And then you mentioned also the Force Detroit. You said the immediate, and you said there's some long-term things like employment and some of those things. So what is Force Detroit doing in those areas to help?
Yeah, full transparency, we're still developing our bench of programs. So, like, we're looking for good mental health providers. Hit me up if you are a good pro-Black mental health provider with the patience to deal with people who are at the center of conflict. We are always looking for employers for our people. We are also in the process of developing a micro entrepreneurial program for folks that want to think about self-employment at a higher level than just like a hustle. We are always, through our case management systems, trying to make sure that people have like their identification and stuff like that that's necessary for them to go to school, and especially like the younger folks that we're dealing with. So just making sure that the things that could trigger a person are as minimal as possible.
So I think you mentioned a couple names earlier, and you talked about, you know, like the emergency response. I imagine that there's not a whole lot of people that can handle that, right? Like that emergency. I think the before and the follow up, all of it, I imagine is very difficult. But to have the type of, I guess, reputation, connection, relationship where somebody would be willing to hear you when they have their minds made up to do something violent to someone else, that's going to take a special type of person to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a challenging notion. I think that's true, that it'll take a special person with the emotional intelligence. But I think we have a city full of Black folks that have transitioned out of, you know, high stakes situation with the emotional intelligence and street level intelligence to actually do this work. The question is, like, when we see them, will we accept their leadership? Will we value their leadership? Will we hear their voice? Will we make room for them at the table?
Yeah. So what does that look like? What is valuing their leadership and making room for them at the table look like?
Yeah, it looks like, you know, not forcing them to speak the King's English, not dressing them up in khakis and polos, acknowledging that there is an inherent expertise in community. And like the dope thing about this work, super dope, is that it allows us to employ people legitimately.
Pay them.
Yeah,
right?
who would otherwise like not be employable or perceived as not employable, right? So I think when people come to us, we just got to accept them as they are, as long as they are truly down for stopping violence and truly willing to do that work. We got to honor them. And then it also looks like it's giving them the same perks and salaries and health care and benefits that we would give any other really, really meaningful staff member.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Because you said when you made your introduction that you're an artist and a poet. We're going to come back to poetry. About every poet that's ever been on the show had to spit something.
Oh, I don't spit stuff. That was 20 years ago.
No, now you don't spit stuff?
I don't.
Oh, she
like
ain't
it's
no
been
poet.
okay.
I don't know no poet that don't have something in their head that they can't spit.
I think Ken is taking the wrong approach. What is that piece that you have committed to memory that you love sharing with the world kind of more than some of the other pieces?
I don't think I have a whole piece committed to memory anymore. That
Give
was
give us a fraction. Can you put
your approach ain't work either.
I'm there, bro. We there. Like, bro, like we're right there. If you just shut up, you know what I'm saying?
Okay, I'll fall back. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, she thinking. You might be right. I
know I am. But you just messed the whole hoop mood up. It's like
this feels like super old school.
Okay, that's fine.
You know what? I got a piece.
You know who you hanging with? We look like
oldest. I got a piece on my cell phone that I'll pull up.
Oh, let's do it.
In the other room.
Let's do it. That's all right.
We can do it when we go out.
We can.
Right. Okay.
Like we can continue on, or we can grab it now.
We can continue on.
All right, let's do it.
We're going to continue on with the interview. I'm going to go grab it while you asking this question, because then the camera going to be on her.
So this was a poem that I spit on in Jerry Earth's. I can't believe that I'm like on a record somewhere and the record is still like alive.
So this is actually on a record?
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Nice. Okay.
And I don't know if I remember the whole thing, but this was my attempt, like a small fractured attempt at like some rap adjacent poetry.
Okay. Dope. Well, I think it's super appropriate with this being 50th anniversary of hip hop, right?
That's facts.
Yeah. Yeah,
and I used to hang out with Injiri Earth. Okay. Shout out to Injiri. Okay. Hathor resurrect, respect queen aspect. My intellect's a past is pretty. I dissect misogyny. Save your venom for someone you can fathom. You can't kill a spirit so divinely deliberate. Goddess exhibited. Love the lyricist. Check your rhetoric. Beauty, I'ma bless you. And that's where we should just drop off at this point.
Why?
Beauty, I'ma bless you.
It's funny. It's like super aggressive in your face. I have learned to be more gentle. Yeah. And so it's hard for me to like get into that fully in the way that I used to. It used to be like super in your face. I was in my face with my kids because they was doing bad stuff. They was like being bad.
Yeah.
Now she got a code. That goes to code switch. And now she got a code switch. Now she can't be super aggressive anymore. Now she got to be,
it didn't gentle person. No, it's facts.
You were saying it's facts.
Yeah. So as far as code switching, my fractured understanding of bonding. I am not a sociologist, but it seems that young men bond by competition and young women bond through similarity. Okay. And I found myself in a space where like folks bonded with each other through competing. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, let's do this thing together. Yeah. And it just didn't, you know what I mean? It left me feeling toxic. Mm. And so I had to reframe and become like the firmness around my approach is much more still.
Okay.
So that is how I would talk about like code switching in terms of like gender dynamics and whatnot.
Yeah.
So you're saying your earlier work reflected a different part of your life than where you're at now, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, interesting. I mean, I appreciate it, right? Like the competition would bring out the uglier part of me. So I tend to try to avoid it and stay away from it, other than an occasional spades game at this annual event that me and a bunch of brothers put on. But yeah, so I say that to say that I appreciate the fact that poem represented where you were, and that it's a little bit awkward for you now. To it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I was teaching hip hop writing and poetry to a bunch of young men who wanted to be rappers and wanted to epitomize these like stereotypes, and my job was to infuse the social justice themes in there. And part of it was talking about like misogyny in our lyrics. Like I remember we would look at these lyrics just objectively, like what if Lil Wayne was singing "Pop Bottles to Your Mama"? You know what I mean? Like we used to have those types of conversations, and they were substantive. They were good conversations, and so I think the energy that I embodied for that poem was more like in your face, like I'm gonna match your energy, and I tend to try not to do that these days.
All right. Try not to. So
right.
So you're successful sometimes, and sometimes you're not.
Like in the advocacy space, sometimes you have to like, make your point known.
Okay.
And I can make my point known.
Okay.
I'm saying, well, we've had conversations before, and you kind of didn't really hold up too much. So
match your energy?
Yeah. She got to match my energy a little bit. So I don't know.
And then she raised you?
And then she raised me. And then she started using big words, and I couldn't.
But
I
wait
couldn't
a minute.
Not
compete
match
then.
your
I
energy.
didn't know we were battling.
Right.
I was battling. You wouldn't. See, that's even worse. I was battling. She wouldn't.
I didn't know. I wasn't aware.
Sounds like Ken wouldn't be a formidable opponent. if first was battling you and you're not even aware that
that's bad. That's just all the way bad. That's just all the way bad.
Oh no. So I think so you talked about kind of some of the things that have recently happened and some of the awards and whatnot. Where are you going in the work that you're doing right now with Force to Trade?
Yeah, so there's a lot of beautiful work that could be long-term. Okay. Right now, the Shot Stoppers initiative is being framed as an experiment. We want to make sure it's successful. Yes. We want to make sure that the work is long-term and that there are robust wraparound services on the back end, so that our families don't experience hardship trying to get jobs and stuff. Like right now, all that stuff is hard. Yeah. And it's because we're trying to figure out what are the best organizations to connect to for referrals. How do we place people with different temperaments? Yeah. We're trying to figure out all of that stuff because it's a super new program, right? It started in July.
Okay. So if I'm interested in that work, which I think we're all interested in having a community that's safer, right? Mm-hmm. Even if it's for selfish reasons. Facts. If I just want it to be safer for me because I want to be able to go where I want to go without the threat of danger. Mm-hmm. But if I wanted to assist in, maybe I have access to job opportunities, but I'm a little bit reluctant because I'm like, okay, if I carve out a few spots for somebody that's kind of come through your program, what are they going to act like on a job site, right? Yeah. My algorithms on social media show me people fighting in workspace. Yeah. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
What do you say to a person that's out there watching this and they really would love to jump in that way, but they're a little bit reluctant for that reason?
Yeah, I mean, I think in an environment like this, I think it's based on like relationship. I think everything is based on relationship, right? At the end of the day, so it's important for the VIs to be a part of the conversation because like everybody has gifts and skills, right?
True.
So like the young people, most of our participants are young people. You know, we might have one that's good with, you know, music or camera equipment that would just thrive in an environment like this,
Gotcha.
right? Maybe you shouldn't house 5 young people in an organization that's like 4 people big, right? Like, there's some real practical decisions that we would make. Also, like, it might not be the best situation for young people with active conflict to pursue public-facing jobs. Just practically. So I think there has to be innovation. I think we also have to create more spaces. And so we're looking into shaping a micro entrepreneurial or cooperative, we haven't decided yet, experience for our participants so that they can grow something that they have more ownership of.
Yeah.
And somewhere in between, like, you know, broad scale business development and hustling is what we're aiming for.
Like it. I really like that. Yeah. But to your I think part of your answer is it's the relationship. So if somebody's out there watching this and they are interested, maybe start looking to connect and form the relationship. And I think together maybe y'all can figure out if there's a good fit. Right?
Yeah, I think we would have a conversation with them, and then we would think about who on our caseload, who in our community we could place with them. Absolutely.
I like that.
Based on the specific work.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I want to say thank you for the work that you're doing. It's, again, important to all of us. I was a young black man once upon a time, many moons ago, and I mean, I grew up in
your caseload. Trust and believe. He would be on your caseload.
That's funny. That sounds like you owe the viewers a story.
He ain't gonna tell the story.
You don't owe the viewers
He ain't gonna tell the story.
If I owed y'all a poem,
he's refined now. He's refined now, so he's not gonna tell the story.
So,
but he would be on your caseload, though.
I will be open to the right question, right? But I won't take up your time and share my story here.
I am particularly interested in what was your journey from being directly impacted by violence, which I think that's what I'm hearing you say, where you are now.
I would say
I wouldn't say impacted by violence. Creating violence. That's what I would say. I would say directly creating violence. That's what
we have language for that at the center of violence, directly impacted
at
by
the center of violence. Okay.
We're gonna cut to a commercial. Ken gonna be like receive some violence. I'm gonna be on your caseload right now.
See, he's still on the caseload. See, he's still on the caseload.
Why?
He's still in the center.
He's still in the center. Share right now. Like you can give us a broad overview.
So y'all gotta be sweating now, like not just because it's hot. No, I mean, I grew up in Brightmoor, in my teenage years, and it was a rough place. And right before moving to Brightmoor, I lived in the 7 Mile area right between Southfield and Greenfield, right? So you know what those neighborhoods are like. And I mean, I was a kid that just really kind of wanted to play sports and kind of chill, but you interact with, and you have a few interactions that can turn you into gladiator mode. You know what I mean? Because it's like at a certain point, you're like, you need to let people know that it's not going to go that easy if you come this way. But I think, violence even in self-defense mode, if not under the proper guidance, ends up evolving to something more, to where you don't have to be defending yourself now. You can just go there, right? Yeah. And I think that was my kind of experience. And then you couple in some of my backstory with my dad, who had me when he was 16. Amazing person, my hero to this day. But, in the 80s, he dealt with drug addiction, which pulled him out of my life for several years during some really crazy times. And growing up in Brightmoor, where it was a bunch of us running around with not a lot of guidance because there wasn't a lot of dads there. Yeah. We just got into some really, really, dumb stuff. And, guys that were friends with me and playing basketball, and football one day, a few weeks later, we were trying to kill each other. What I mean? So that's an abbreviated version of some of our experience. I mean, I've had, cocktails thrown in my house that landed in a spot that I would sleep in probably an hour before they landed there, that were meant to kill me. And it was in response to some things that I did to somebody else, where I, sought to hurt them. So
yeah, I think it's super important to talk about this as Black folk. First, because there is an assumption in society about the who is doing this stuff, their inherent value or lack thereof. Yeah. And then on our side, as Black professionals, an unwillingness to talk about how we've navigated this in ways that make other folks. Hey, Kurt. I'm sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
In ways that make other people feel like they might not belong here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, definitely.
And I think that's one of the challenges of my work, is that if there is proximity, just like if there is proximity to this work, people, or to this space, people may not admit it. Yeah. And then that makes it harder for all of the Black folks who are having unfortunately, a normative experience in Detroit to share it and to feel like they belong.
Yeah. I think what's important, I know what's important about the work that you do is, when Dwan, some of his backstory, and where he's elevated to and where he's at, is because of VIs, or violence intervention specialist, who at that time was not violence intervention specialist. They didn't have a title, but they were people who entered his life to do what you're doing, right? And help him see where his values truly lie, right? And so, which makes him who he is today. And that's important to the work that you're doing, to help people who find themselves in savage situations, find themselves portraying kind of what the environment has put on them to portray, see that, they're more than that. Yeah. And I think that's just super important work. Yeah. Because we are, more than that, right? More than what people say we are. So.
Yeah, it is, and I'm grateful to be doing it, and I'm grateful to be doing it in partnership with some dope folks and some dope organizations in the coalition that we work with.
No doubt. Y'all keep it up. We need y'all so desperately. I mean, that goes without saying. So, anything we can do to help. Thanks for, inviting me to share a part of, the reason I feel connected to the work that you're doing, and appreciate it so much. It done got too heavy for me.
Crack a joke, Ken.
I normally have one.
But no, I appreciate it. And I think one of the things that I'd love to say, because my dad is still my hero to this day, is that a big part of the reason I am who I am is because I had a couple men step in and kind of like really fill the gap during the time when he was like the addiction had him at his lowest point. But he came back stronger than ever, right? And he's one of those people that you would probably call an intervention specialist, because he went back to some of the same places that he would cop, right? And talk to the brothers that were there, that were hustling and whatnot, and they loved him there. They were happy to see him okay, and he would speak to them in a real like prophetic way that would kind of help give them some direction and some guidance. And seeing him like return to who I knew him to be before he got caught up is another thing that kind of inspires me and helps me understand that, like, you know, what we would think was impossible is definitely possible. You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's super important, right? Like, we have these names and stuff like that for this work, but the work that we do was long done in our community, or else it would have completely collapsed.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you know, so in every hood across America, there's a barber or another type of brother and a bunch of sisters, right?
No doubt.
Feeding people, putting money on books, making sure that, you know, hey, I don't know what you're doing, but you need to take your little tail to school.
Yes.
And it's not always soft,
Yeah.
but usually that's because our community needs to, you know, we need to kick them in the pants a little bit with love.
No doubt. And keep praying for him. Like, that's what I said. I know it's folk praying for me. And that was the thing that my dad would always tell us when he was at his low point. He would say, look, like, you know, caught up, I'm messed up, but pray for me. You know what I mean? And he said he would say, if he was here, I knew if wasn't nobody else going to pray for me, my kids would, you know. And I do remember consistently doing that. So, keep holding us down. Folks that's putting money on people's books, folks that's cooking a meal, and y'all that aren't a part of a structured organization but are doing that work. Like, we need y'all, we love y'all, and don't stop.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Ooh. We out.